Good evening, colleagues across town and across the globe. It's the 27th of May in the year of our Lord 2021. I don't know if you folks out there in the future who are looking at this on your archival devices still talk about 2021, but we are here, and it is some sort of episodic, Herculean, almost emotively magnificent period of time where events follow events and are followed by consequences. And this is the Public Affairs Public Access Show. And what's happening right at this moment is that Paul Colby and the investigators are commandeering this platform to bring you our interpretation of what's been going on and what is going down. So expect yourselves to be surprised and maybe educated, and for goodness sake, fasten your seatbelts because we have a wild ride for you tonight. When I say we, I'm talking about me and my core of crack investigators. Now, 3 investigators have been with me for most of 2020 and 21. However, one of my investigators is away tonight and will explain that. But let me talk about who is here. First of all, Roger that. And Roger, as some of you may know, is the screen test pilot for the Home Brewing Truth Alliance, located in Chester's Hell, Wyoming. That's only one of the things that I know Roger to have been doing over the last few years. Roger, are you enjoying your current status?
I certainly am, boss, although Chester's Hell is aptly named. I would prefer that we be in perhaps one of the larger cities, but
I guess you don't have convenience stores, huh?
No, there's very little here. There's some little satanic like critters running around. I think they call them moose or something. Since I'm a city boy, I'm not sure what they are, but being a screen test pilot is a fascinating. It's a little known branch that's regulated by the FAA. And I'm learning quite a bit about the regulations now that I'm a screen test pilot.
And one of those regulations, I guess, is that you have to wear that black uniform all the time, right?
Oh, that's correct. Yes, we especially in the summer in the desert, because it absorbs the heat rather well, and that's kind of an endurance type thing that the FAA wants you to go through.
And after that endurance, then I guess you kick back and have a couple of, what do I call them, home brews?
No, you betcha.
All right. All right. Another crack investigator who's with me tonight, and I'll tell you in a minute why I am surprised by that. Ella Mentry is a global sales representative for fast-acting food stiffeners of the European Onion. Actually, that is, since I started talking to Ella about this, I realized that fast food stiffeners are everywhere, but I was unaware of that until just recently.
Yes, and it actually makes it very useful if you, say, enjoy a crunchier texture to your food, but you also have a lot of soup on hand, or you just happen to also enjoy soup. Your problem is solved. It makes it much easier to eat soup with a fork.
Well, I'll bet that's, since it's so European, I'm sure it's coming this way, probably to the West Coast first, and then the rest of us, as it usually works. But Ella, since I have you here with me, I have to share something. I got an email today, a video email, in fact, that really confused me. Mr. Producer, do we have a copy of that we can show the folks?
Hi, boss.
Here it is.
It's Ella, and I'm in a place in New Jersey that is not on any maps. I am disguised as a heart-shaped tomato with arms and legs. I am working on that story I told you about. Unfortunately, there's no airport here, so I
Well,
can't get back for tonight's
this
show. But
message,
I will
this came
explain
to me
everything when I
surreptitiously.
return.
It just showed up top. I know this isn't your voice. I know I didn't send you on a reporting mission to somewhere that's not on a map. Maybe you can explain that to me.
You know, I wish I had an explanation as well, boss. This is, in fact, the third time this has happened this week. Clearly, none of them are me. I'm mostly, I'm not sure if I need to get law enforcement involved. I'm worried that my credit is going to take a hit. So I'm not really sure what's going on with that particular hack.
Okay, well, who you're looking at right here, that's the real Ella that I know, elementary. I don't know who that other person was, but we're going to get to the bottom of it eventually because people have tried to hack this show before, as you might remember, for an episode last year. Anyway, my third principal investigator, at least among the ones who want to be on TV regularly, that would be Dandelion. Dandelion is not here tonight, but I wouldn't be surprised by that. I know why he's not here. You can see his credentials here in the slide. Dan is now heading up the Civilian Volunteer Air Force, and that is not to be confused with something as ordinary as the Civil Air Patrol or something like that. This is a new unit of people who are paying attention to some things in the sky. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. You see right here in the picture from his latest TV interview that some yellow blob thing in the sky followed him home. But that's not why he's missing tonight. No, I'll tell you the real story. You've heard that Princess Diana was tricked into giving her most famous interview to the BBC. This is the one in which she said, there are 3 people in this marriage. Well, I don't think that's the real story, and neither does Dandelion, because we found out before they edited the video of that interview, she actually said, there are 5 people in this marriage. Well, Dan was able to track down one of them, a construction worker in Brighton who is now something like 65 years old, who has a hell of a story to tell. And I don't know exactly what it is, but I know that at this very minute, Dan is probably sitting in a pub with him somewhere, believing every word he says. Now, as for the other person in the marriage, I don't know who that would be.
I've heard rumors that it's actually one of Queen Elizabeth's corgi dog handlers. So it was kind of an inside job, so to speak. So
well, that would explain a lot. But I guess this is not the last we'll hear about that story. Anyway, we have some big stories to cover tonight. We're going to start with a really monumental change of belief or change of official story, if you want to put it that way. And that involves those things in the sky that we can't explain. We used to call them unidentified flying objects. And then we're going to link that into some unusual behavior by members of the Republican Party. And then we're going to talk about how TV shows spin off reality, including things like the election recounts that are going on in Arizona and Georgia. And then we're going to talk about that hack of the Cologne oil folks. I'm trying to think of a generous way to put this. The Cologne oil people who got hacked for some reason and hacked in some way and had to pay some kind of ransom. Anyway, things like that don't just stay in the news, they become movies. And so we'll talk about that. And then we'll talk about how states are opening up, including our home state here of Texas. And we'll talk about some other things in the economy, like what to do with discarded material from the pandemic era, and what to do about people who aren't vaccinated, and what's going on before the Supreme Court. Sounds like a big agenda, doesn't it? Well, let's start at the top. UFOs. You know what? UFOs have been around a long time. I think you all know that. In fact, we've got a slideshow that I can produce for you thanks to the people at the Air and Space Heater Museum. That's in Flushing Meadows. If you haven't been there, don't bother, because it's all online. I mean, I'm going to show the pictures to you anyway, right? Back in the early days, we did have flying saucers, and you've got a picture of one right now. In the old days, you know, according to the story, there was a pilot, just a regular pilot guy. I'm not going to use his name in the books because it wasn't his real name. It was really Arturo Sadusky, I think, as best I can tell. But he saw some things in the sky and he said, these look just like flying saucers. And that made some news all by itself, that pilots were seeing things fly in the sky. But what really got the UFO investigation going by mostly private citizens was when there was a crash in Roswell, New Mexico. Apparently some little aliens had their ship crash inconveniently. Maybe they were recovered, but after that crash, UFOs were being talked about by ordinary people who said, are we alone in the universe?
I was actually, to interrupt, boss, I was actually at Roswell and I witnessed the crash. I was a young man at the time, and our teenage soccer camp was practicing in the desert, and it came down, and yes, there were funny little people came out, but you know.
Well, you know what? Ella was telling me that she saw another crash. It's not even in the history books, but she said the guys that she saw looked pretty normal. They had crew cuts and they sort of looked like a 50s rock group, right?
Yes, definitely little men, but they were, very, very well groomed, very fashionable. And I was also privy to some information on another crash that happened in the 1800s, where a bunch of little women were actually on the UFO. And the story apparently inspired a very kind of a hit novel. And it crashed into a swampland, so that the family is in fact known by the last name Marsh.
I'll be dadgum. I wonder if there are more crashes that we'll hear about as more of this story gets told for the first time. But let me get back to the narrative for a minute. I don't want to lose you in a lot of detail, because there were another generation of these UFOs. I like to call them the top cabin UFOs, and we've got a picture of these. These were mostly associated with the era where people were finding cattle mutilations, and they were saying it must be the work of these guys in those interplanetary vehicles coming down here. And at least that's the way I heard the story.
I think actually the way I heard it, boss, was they were actually kettle mutilations, where they'd cut the legs. You know, you'd get the cast iron kettle with the little legs on it, and they'd go ahead and they'd cut off one of the legs, and the poor kettle would then have to kind of waddle around on two legs. So
you mean their real goal was to mutilate kitchen tools?
Yeah, it was a rather strange cult that kind of peaked.
So I guess the carcasses that they were finding, the bones and stuff like that, that was just people who had roasted an entire cow or an entire pig and left the remains out there next to the...
Well, there is a rumor that those were planted by the government in order to frame some of the early Western settlers.
That's how we got a Pony Express, right?
That's where you got It's a very strong possibility.
We'll have to tell that story later. I've heard tell when Dan used to be in American pubs, he would go on with that story for hours. But part 3, we saw a new kind of UFO which had a detached control module. You can see the picture here. And when these showed up, I think they were almost always tied to abductions. And there are some famous abductions. I mean, there's been more than one, so you probably know about them. They're famous, but I don't want to make people disclose something they are uncomfortable disclosing. But I think even some of my investigators either were personally abducted or their brother Mario. Oh, I guess I've let the cat out of the bag.
Well,
anyway.
In fact, my entire high school class was abducted. We spent some time around the Alpha Centauri area. It was supposed to be our spring break trip, but it just sort of went horribly awry. We did go through some rips in the space-time continuum, some wormholes and such. This is why everyone finds it very hard to believe that I'm actually 95 years old.
Did that change any of your career, like your majors or your career path?
Not so much, but they were the ones who introduced me to the idea of the quick-acting food stiffeners.
I always suspected that came from another planet. Thank you for confirming that, Ella.
Well, that explains a lot. And before I leave this general area in history, in recent times, you see the tourist bus versions of the UFOs. And we've got a slide for that too, I think. That's because Earth and its inhabitants, we're pretty famous elsewhere in the galaxy and the universe because we are so curious here. Our behavior, what we do to the planet, things like that. And so anymore, it's just not a single guy or a couple of guys coming here or a couple of little women coming here to have a look around. Instead, they bring an entire class of naturopaths and anthropologists from, like, I think Zeta Reticuli and several other places. They're known for using these tourist bus UFOs, and they come down here and look around. But you know why? You know what ties this to the present day? I'll tell you what ties this to the present day. The Air Force has just put out an official confirmation that they are thinking more about the possibility that some vehicles that are in the air aren't from the ground here. They're from outside of this area. And that's, the Air Force reported it. I didn't know that in the administration of the former president, that the Air Force itself, thinking about the president's own, persona, had tried to hip up their identifier by calling themselves the Air Force. Anyway, you know all about that.
Is there any truth to the rumor, boss, that at one time they were going to, instead of camouflage on the sides of tanks, they were going to paint them orange?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I thought we had. Well, no, we didn't cover that. You told me there were things about that were classified, or no. Somebody told me that. It wasn't you, because I told you that.
That's true.
Yeah, that's how it worked. Anyway, these new things in the air, I'll tell you what made them change their mind. Look at these new things in the air. We've got a picture here of one of those yellow blobs. It looks just like the yellow blob that was following Dandelion home. And he told me, well, I guess he said that thing scared the blank out of me because it was hovering over his car and it was yellow. He'd never seen anything like that with 4 arms. And it spoke in not only several languages, but several languages at one time. He said he could pick them all up. Here's another picture. I'm not sure what this thing is, but it is not the regular kind of craft we have seen up till now. So it is because of this, I think, that official agencies of the government are having to modify their public statements and say maybe there is something going on, which leads me to the Republican Party. And this is kind of ironic when we're talking about little green men and women. Look at this headline from the Sarasota Serenader. The House Republicans have decided to rename themselves Little Green Men. And I don't think it's not necessarily because of the aliens. Instead, I think it's because of somebody named Marjorie Taylor Greene who won't shut up. And as a matter of fact, the Republican Party has decided it's better if she doesn't shut up. So a lot of them are, well, what can I say?
Not to interrupt, but my intel has stated that Marjorie Taylor Greene is in fact one of those interplanetary tourists, and is here in an undocumented fashion, as is Ted Cruz, and that I'm told his Mexico trip was actually, he was trying to get back to Roswell and took a wrong turn because he's trying to leave. He's tried to conceal his identity as with per Air Force regulations with a rather large amount of facial hair.
Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here. Is it first, or did you say that yesterday on? Oh yeah.
So no, I believe it was during our conference call yesterday.
Yeah,
so.
During the conference. Yes. So it is. That's the first time that's been said in public. Although I guess a lot of you already suspected that because of the erratic behavior of some of the leadership in the Republican Party. When I say erratic behavior, let's talk for just a minute here about the leader of the House Republicans, Mr. McCarthy. If you go back to the insurrection, at least that's what some rational people used to be calling it, on January 6th, you might remember that Mr. McCarthy said he talked to Donald Trump, and Donald Trump seemed to be pretty happy about what was going on, and he kind of laid into the former president, you know. He used some strong language to say, not okay. Well, you know what he's saying these days after he went to Mar-a-Lago and after he came back and said, I must do what will keep me in power. Or I'm not quoting him. I'm just assuming it was some kind of a thought like that. Well, he just gave a statement, and it is quoted in the Creative Historical Revision Quarterly. I think we can show that to you. In this, he says, Trump told me basically that he did not have a connection to the internet. And in other words, he's trying to say that Trump wasn't even watching. And so he didn't really know what was going on down there at the seat of government. But internet is spelled wrong here. I can't help but notice. Internet. I wonder if that was a deliberate misspelling, because this is, after all, a historical journal. You guys know anything about that?
I believe that was done on purpose. So when you do a Google word search, it will throw you off. You won't be actually able to find the document because they were assuming the document would be leaked. So I believe that's why they did. But Ella may know more on the origins of that.
Well, I was told it was actually pronounced internet. Now make of that what you will. We're still trying to decipher what exactly that code is.
Okay, well, you folks...
It could be, given the former president, maybe they meant incontinent, you think?
I believe that's a possibility, too.
Well, folks, you need to stay tuned to see where we go with this, because we're still trying to figure it out. But that's not the only thing Mr. McCarthy has said lately, which is at odds with what he said before. The other thing he's been passing around as a new news item is that he did talk to the president that day, and the president, the reason he hadn't called the National Guard, he had been trying to, but he didn't have the number. And here in the capital crimes report here, the apologist, it says that Trump basically had the wrong number. I'm not sure who he called, but he was asking Mr. McCarthy for the real number of the National Guard.
Well, boss, my intel has said that he was actually attempting to call Joe McCarthy and leaving messages for him, not realizing that Joe has been dead for many years.
Oh, well, he would have been a good person to talk to in a moment of authoritarian weakness. Once again, I find myself coining terms that shouldn't ever be repeated.
And the only number on his speed dial was to Krispy Kreme donuts and Burger King. So he didn't really know how to call information, and everyone was too afraid to actually tell him that he didn't know it.
I would have figured there was a hamburger joint on the speed phone, but I guess he gets that service in-house. He doesn't really have to call out.
Now, that's what my sources say, certainly.
Well, okay, one thing Mr. McCarthy has been needing to do, because he's been hanging out with Marjorie Taylor Greene and the other aliens who have infiltrated the Republican Party, they had to get rid of that troublemaker, Liz Cheney, who was an actual conservative. And even some of us who are not conservative are always impressed by people who actually believe in something. So we got a hold of this insider. It's a commentary. Frankly, I'm not sure who wrote it, but it kind of gives the feel of what the Republicans were thinking about. They said Liz Cheney could not play pro football. That was obvious. Not that it mattered. And you can say that again. We were going to make fun of her pony until every race car driver in America believed that they were never interested in casual sex or real infrastructure reform. Now, I guess that explains their position on infrastructure reform, although I'm not sure it explains their position on casual sex. But anyway, that's not a...
Liz Cheney and casual sex is, you've put that idea in my head, boss, and it's going to take me months of therapy to get it out, I'm afraid.
I'm sorry. I know it's a sensitive issue, and I'm sensitive to why it's a sensitive issue. I think y'all know that. I mean, I read
we don't need to go into all that and bring up the restraining order and all that sort of thing.
No.
We're under the bridge now.
I don't think we do. But one more thing I wanted to mention while we are talking about, wait. I'm not going to mention it yet because we have more to say about the Republicans, as you know, in their state houses, and they have a lot of state house support and control. They are working to undo what's happened, just like some of these people are trying to undo the history of that insurrection on the 6th of January. So you will see some Republicans, and we've seen more than one lately, as reported here in the Baltimore Blab, they are talking about that insurrection as if it were just a bunch of tourists who were, they were in high spirits. Well, yeah, they were definitely in high spirits, but to explain why this was just another tourist visit to the Capitol, they are pointing out that these days almost all tourists are heavily armed. That's not been my experience, at least not to some of the monuments that I've visited lately. What about you?
I'm not familiar with armed tourists, but you know,
Maybe in other countries it's a custom, but here it would be new.
yes,
I've seen some tourists that were, they had great arms, say from climbing, Grand Canyon or Machu Picchu. But other than that,
I
I've
mostly
not seen
see them
anything
with
open.
cameras. That's my impression of how tourists come equipped. Anyway, that's what the Republicans are saying. And since they have been saying that, that this was just tourists out on on some kind of a picnic, well, in America, anything that catches fire as an idea is going to be turned into some sort of money-making proposition, and you have tour companies that were looking for something new to do because they've got your like you just mentioned, the Grand Canyon, or you can talk about places where people go and actually relax. But nowadays, people either need or seem to want more adventure, probably because they spent the last year at home working out of a bedroom as an office. So if you want to take a turbo tour, that's the name of a company that's offering you a real-time experience. You can go to the Capitol and you can enter the Capitol not through the front door, but through some of the windows, still broken windows, some of the doors, maybe through the roof, maybe through that panel on top of the chandelier that they busted. Yeah,
I understand you can now zip line directly from the rotunda, the top of the rotunda, down to the mezzanine.
I think
and actually the handle, what I've heard is to put a nice touch on it, the handles on the zip line that you grab are actually made of the same material. It's essentially a zip tie, so you can get the whole experience of being in the Capitol with zip ties.
I think the other part that appeals to many people, normally if you visit the Capitol in the old days, you would call ahead to your senator or representative and say, I'd like to visit on March 13. But with one of these tours, they say that you can bust right in and you can go not only knock on the door of your elected representative, you can knock the damn thing down if you want. You can terrorize their staff. And I'm not sure what arms you're allowed to carry on these tours, but we know it is about being heavily armed, right?
And well, you're given complimentary bear spray, is my understanding. But
Yes.
I've also been told that Disney World.
I can't see what he's trying to tell us.
Oh, yes, the gift shop. I'm told that after your tour experience, you can visit the gift shop where they have say buffalo head headdresses available, free podiums, maybe some laptops.
I imagine they have copies of some of Nancy Pelosi's notepads and
you
things
can actually
like
you can buy a life-size replica of Nancy Pelosi's desk to use in your own home as a footrest. And then I've also heard Disney wants to get on this, and they're going to actually make little animatrons of, say, the Q shaman speaking in the middle of the house, and so that'll be a more interactive experience when you're.
Oh yes, yeah. In fact, that is part of the Save the Breakfast Muffins part of the tour. That's you can. It's sort of a race with your fellow tourists. You have to see who can save the breakfast muffins and also bless the Capitol at the same time.
Well, when they
can you get little fire extinguisher replicas as a souvenir as well, or you can use them to bash. You can use them to bash little.
I think our producer has already taken one of these tours. That's why he knows what's in the gift shop. But I've seen some stuff he's got in his closet, and I don't think some of it is. Yeah, the buff. Yeah, I don't think some of what he has there is legal to possess in these United States. But I'm curious, first of all, I don't know if they have any package tours of other, other American events, that you could relive. I'm sure there will be a Civil War tour pretty soon where you can actually, you can use one of those old cannons and cannonballs. But I'm curious, when they finally take some people to trial, if you'll be able to do a tour and go in there, say, and make the closing argument just like a real attorney would. I think that's what it's coming to. Everybody in America thinks their own experience is somehow substandard to what they're watching on TV.
Well,
they
uh,
because I'm using that as a segue to talk about some things that are on TV now. That's where I was going with that. Anyway, that being said, one thing that has emerged as a TV show, and we'll get to it, it's built around the voter vote recount in Arizona, and this is a pretty funny kind of a platform, just as it is. I mean, you have a right-wing cybersecurity company coming in with no previous experience to supervise a recount of votes only in counties where the former president lost. And you have people using X-ray machines, and they seem to be looking for particular things that would demonstrate that ballots ballots like are supposed to have been produced outside of the USA, maybe with bamboo as paper. I mean, this is like a carnival. That kind of bamboo. One thing I've noticed.
It's amazing what our producer has in his closet, isn't it, boss?
I was just saying that if you saw the rest of it, you would want to leave this show and go start your own network.
Well, as we know,
which is what Ella told me.
I'm kind of sensitive to the use of the term closet, so perhaps we should move on from there. But
all right. Well, anyway, those X-ray machines. Here's what I understand. A lot of people think they're looking for bamboo in the paper to prove that the voting ballots were made somewhere else and shipped here and used to boost Joe Biden to victory in some key counties, precincts in Arizona. But what I am told, the evidence for this would be that very few bamboo flutes have been produced this year as opposed to last year, which means somebody is using up the bamboo. But
it's also leading to a crisis with panda bears. There's a mass die-off, a mass extinction of panda bears because there's this mysterious disappearance of bamboo. So
Ella, can't they use a food stiffener product to make some natural grasses more crunchy for these pandas, or is that something they're still working on?
That is something that we're still working on. With the bamboo shortage, we've been trying to use manicotti and see if we can stiffen that enough. We're trying to help people with because during the pandemic, a lot of people happened to take up the pan flute. We've seen a lot of resurgence of things over the past year that we haven't seen in many years. And so the bamboo shortage has really, really hit people hard on that.
Wow. I didn't well, explain me this if you can. I am told they were also looking for, number one, ivory. Number two, they were looking for unidentified aerial poop. I don't know why. And they were looking for
the pandas.
What's that?
I would assume to track the pandas.
Oh, all right. And they were also looking for any remnants of Ted Cruz's, what does this say? Ethical boundaries? Something about
those have yet to be found.
They haven't found any traces of an ethical.
No, none whatsoever.
No.
And
Okay.
and there's also they're also trying to find is not only his ethics but his dignity, and there's been no evidence that he has any dignity either. So
well, maybe he took that with him to Mexico and forgot to bring it back.
That's entirely possible. But
well, anyway, what I was trying to explain is television focuses on anything that's in the news and turns it into a special, not always a series, sometimes just a special. And in this case, we have the networks doing the program called The Recount. And even though it's billed as a comedy, because it's pretty funny, they're actually using real people, real Republican vote counters in starring roles. And actually, I guess it's cinema verite. They're just filming what goes on. And oh, I'm sorry. What is this that I'm trying to think of here? Anyway, they just film these people doing what they're doing, including eating lunch. And that's why, I found it interesting that these people use food stiffeners in everything. I mean, even their peanut butter and, sandwiches, things like that, have to be made more granite-like before they can actually,
There is a deep level of masochism amongst the group, so they do kind of overutilize the food stiffeners.
I'll be dadgum.
Could food stiffeners also be used to give the Republican Party a spine, do you think?
That's something I believe we should look into now that we know that they're a huge market.
Yeah. There's a spinoff because The Recount has done so well. I mean, it is a major hit. Now, of course, your homegrown box office, those kind of platforms, they like to follow up. If the networks are having a hit, then they follow it up with another one. And so they have this program is not just loosely based on The Recount. It's the same show called The Other Recount. And I guess this one is technically set in Georgia as opposed to Arizona. So it's like when you watch NCIS Estimate. NCIS is in, New Orleans, and it's in Los Angeles, and it's the same thing with The Recount. The Recount is going to have the same group of characters in every city or every state where the Republican Party in the state Senate or state House is big enough, strong enough, well paid enough to stage a voter recount.
My sources say, in fact, they're going to, just like in the old days, where you have a touring production of the play before it goes to Broadway. So they're going to drive through random counties all over the United States, attempting to find bamboo in the ballot box.
That is just fascinating, ladies and gentlemen. But
and of course, we all know who's funding them. It's Mr. Soros.
We do?
Yeah, it's certainly Mr. I think it's Mr. Soros. There's no.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
He's doing that as a ruse because people think he's on the other side, but he really isn't. He's actually a Republican. It's a little known. In addition to being a wealthy.
Yeah, I think he financed some of the religious movements of our time that went awry, and I think that was on purpose, that they would go awry, But anyway, before I leave behind this whole subject of Republicans, President Biden came in here saying he wanted to work with these people to accomplish things that were good for the country. And if Mr. Biden had his way, one thing that he would want to do is to forgive student loans. You know, student loan forgiveness is one of those things where if you took a poll, most Americans are in favor of that. What's interesting
This is
is that
true.
the Republicans now have changed their tune a little bit, and they say, we are willing to forgive student loans, but you still have to pay them back. In other
Yes,
words,
I received a letter along those lines that said, we forgive you for this incredibly foolish decision decades ago, but we forgive you, and asked me for money, reminded me
I
that
see.
I received a letter, and they simply said in order to receive forgiveness, I just had to say 3 Hail Marys and 2 Our Fathers. But you know that may be because I went to a Catholic university, perhaps.
I think they have a Zen version too, and a Buddhist version, and a
It's the Zen where I believe
version.
the Zen version is actually you pay the loan and you do not pay the loan simultaneously. Is that how the Zen?
Oh, first there is a mountain, and then there is no mountain.
Yes, yeah. So
okay.
There is a debt, then there is no debt, but they both exist. It's kind of like Schrodinger's cat.
Do you think
they simultaneously exist as both a loan and a not loan? So,
but they're not in a box.
No,
you know,
but
you can actually
observe them. You don't know whether there's a loan or there is not a loan. It's the act of observing that forces
makes me want to become a songwriter. I think I could do something with that. Anyway, as all of this is going on and the entertainment field is capitalizing on what is happening in the rest of the world, you know, current events, it's interesting to me that AT&T decided to spin off Warner Brothers. Now, one thing that always happens when you hear about, you know, corporations spinning off some aspect of their global entity, it's usually because something wasn't making enough money. And in this case, I have heard rumors that for certain television networks, next year will be all about Zoom seasons. If you do a show on Zoom, you don't have location costs, you don't have union problems. Actually, you can get a cast anywhere. Just set up a phone call. But I'm not sure how far they can take that. I mean, what do you do?
They're having some trouble with, because as you know, when you bring up Zoom, it automatically attracts your house cat to get up and stand on top of the keyboard. So there's some things they have to work out. I don't know since.
Well, yeah, Animal Planet does stand to benefit the most from the upcoming TV season, from what I understand.
Okay.
Are they going to focus, as Animal Planet? Do you think they're going to focus on the panda depopulation that's been instigated?
Yeah.
Historically, they've stayed away from anything too political, like who's at the water hole right now. I mean, if it was just one species, then they're fine with it. But if they're arguing about who drinks next, you know, as a home brewer, I suppose, Roger, that you deal with that all the time.
Well, I pretty much, you know, when I go to a watering hole, I get pretty much blotto, so I don't really notice who else is at the watering hole. But sometimes they do appear to be. If you've seen some of my dates, they do appear to be a different species. So, but perhaps they're related to Marjorie Taylor Greene, and they're actually from another planet. That's
well, okay. Since we're talking about not only movies but also the technology that goes with it, one thing that I'm pretty intrigued with is this recent hack of Cologne E-Oil, which is a big company that supplies a lot of oil through pipelines to a lot of places. And there's a documentary now. I've seen some preview clips. Pipeline Up. That's what it's called. And the subtitle is What Really Happened at Cologne E-Oil. Well, for me, I'd like to see the rest of the documentary, because I still haven't been able to figure out what is supposed to have happened. I mean, I heard that some of the bathrooms got locked. I heard that the lights were out in the lunchroom. But other than that, I don't know what got hacked. There certainly wasn't any shortage of gas. And I don't understand why they paid so much money in ransomware. And of course, that's going to be in these cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin.
Now, boss, it turns out my sources telling me the whole thing was instigated by one of their employees clicking on naughtycheerleaders.com, and that was used as a backdoor to get into the pipeline company. I don't know if Ella's heard anything like that. But
Well,
that's precisely what I heard as well.
not that I know of. I have no personal experience, mind you, with naughty cheerleaders.
Well, the only movies I've seen in that vein are the ones about exceptionally gifted cheerleaders and prize student cheerleaders and cheerleaders on a mission. I think I've seen several, but naughty cheerleaders, I had never heard of that. I mean, why would that happen? Anyway, hopefully we're going to get to see that movie. But since I mentioned cryptocurrencies, Tesla, as just one example, Tesla was taking cryptocurrencies for a long time, and then they stopped. I know that there are a lot of cryptocurrencies out there. I don't understand much about it. One thing I do know is that the federal government now is going to Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies because, as it shows here in the slide, they're going to be paying Social Security benefits and income tax returns in these cryptocurrencies. And it says in the memo to Dear Citizen, I got one. If you didn't get one, you'll probably get one soon. It says you will still easily be able to purchase booze, cigarettes, home repair supplies, but that's assuming that you know the right thing to say to the people. Anyway, so there you go for that.
So boss, I actually, being a fan of these emerging cryptocurrencies, I put a lot of my investments into what is known as Popecoin. That's an emerging one. It's like a cryptocurrency, but it's actually a catacomb currency, which is backed up by the Vatican Bank. And if you buy 50 or more Pope coins, you get 2 free indulgences.
That's interesting. Do you also get to wear the funny little Pope hat, or is that more
after 200? Because the perks kind of go up the more you buy.
Interesting.
All right. Let me just cover a couple of more things here before we run out of time. First of all, Texas is among the states that are opening up everything for business. And in Texas, that's only going to involve a couple of people who are restricted. For example, if you're taking a taxi, you can only have 12 unmasked people in a taxi. Or if you have a pet tiger, I suppose they have to be masked. I'm not sure what they're going to do about bank robbers, but anyway, very few people.
I think they're going to be required to wear MAGA masks because they're being MAGA has a history of robbing people, so that's
okay. And then because of the opening of business, a lot of it has to do with you're being vaccinated. Well, first of all, we have to do something with all of the products, like say masks that got discarded by the billions. So there's going to be some economic opportunities for people who can make things like I understand bowling pins or a line of fashion things, ransomware. But
boss, I've been using mine to cover my Fiat in inclement weather. They're surprisingly useful.
I'm glad that's a small car you're working with. I can't cover my Rover with it. Anyway, they're going to have to offer incentives to people, like they offer magazine subscriptions and things like that to people who well, who haven't been vaccinated but might be convinced. And
I sorry to interrupt you again, boss. I was actually told I would get NFL Network for free on my microchip when I was vaccinated, but it's just been a bunch of golf highlights, and I'm disturbed about the bait and switch. But what can you do?
Yeah, I'm also equally disturbed. I was so looking forward to getting both gills and webbed feet so I could just slay at my Masters swim tournaments, and today all I've got is this useless arm growing out of the middle of my back that I
Well, is that helpful if you have maybe an itch you can't reach?
Well, it's also good when when I go to the beach in the summer. Now I'll be able to put sunscreen on all areas of my back. I think so. That'll be quite useful.
I'm glad this is happening for you folks. And by the way, just to close things out on this note, a lot of things that are important to us don't get held. They just don't go to the Supreme Court for adjudication, for wise people to say this is the law. But there is one thing that's going up there to the Supreme Court that I think will be very important. And it's a case that's called Camilton Wuha versus Poultry Platform. In case you haven't read about it, let me just give you a little heads up. This guy, Camilton Wuha, he used to work at a library, the Ray Wong Suit Library, and he had a job polishing drunken sailor statutes. When he'd get off work every night, he would stop by the Poultry Platform for his favorite respite after a hard day's work, and that involved partly poached eggs and chicken in a diaper, his favorite things. Now, this restaurant, which incidentally, it was, I understand it was owned by some Lithuanians and run by some Abyssinians and had Mexican food and so like it was one of those restaurants where you could probably get chicken in a diaper and you could also get his favorite partly poached eggs. So in his mind, it was all important to have the chicken first before the egg. And what this lawsuit is about is which came first. Because he claims that on a particular night, he came in to get his chicken first and then his partly poached egg. And the waiter says that's what he got. He says no, but the waiter says you were on your cell phone when I brought your chicken in a diaper, and then you didn't even notice when I brought the partly poached egg. And he says, no, I know you brought the partly poached egg first because I asked you what chicken it came out of. And it's one of those suits where there are going to be contested facts. That's what we call it, contested facts. And you know what? This thing is going to be resolved at the highest levels. You know what? You know what the motto of this story is?
The moon is a harsh mistress, a military base, a computer. From Groom Lake, the armed forces send up commuters. Lunar particle beams cause floods, quakes, droughts. Weather control is population control. Have you figured that out? It should be front page in the space age. At this date, somebody gotta rattle your cage.